talks about, if I can, a Trono museum kind of a thing, and you can expand on that if you want to when your time comes. Mike talks about things on the river more so. Everybody has, Robert's background being with the chamber and Main Street has a lot of stuff to do with business and downtown revitalization and things of that nature. So everybody has a passion, and what we thought was when we started the process, and we had our first meeting at the fire department, and that was, you know, we as a council want to initiate things that we believe in and have discussions on those, and that's what we started. Then COVID hit, and that was the end of it. Now we're back here again. So that's a quick update in terms of where we're at, and only because somebody had to and nobody else did. I brought up community pride and volunteerism. Doesn't have to be what we're starting with. I did this little brief outline and stuff. I'm going to just read it. I think it kind of fits in with a good overall big picture. I was talking with Sherry about it, I know. Gary and I, well, we've all talked about it. I mean, community pride, hello, and volunteerism, which fits into anything. If anybody that has an idea that they want to follow a particular interest, you're going to need volunteers to potentially to help you with it and follow along with it. So that's all we're doing here. This does not have to be the agenda we follow. I'm going to just start with this a little bit just for the sake of doing it. And just, this is no more than thoughts that I've had along the way and actually just put down this morning. Okay. So we're just going to kind of start with that. And again, I do think this lends itself to a good sort of overall theme to start with, potentially. Community pride, volunteerism. You can see it's pretty extensive. But what I want to emphasize is if anybody has any thoughts, any ideas, any particular interest, anytime during this meeting, just start off and jump in, okay? Because there is no particular agenda in this. So I just want to read this. Community pride is fostered over time with communication. That's the big key that we're going to be talking about a little bit. And through a series of achievements that bring a sense of belonging. Where there is a high level of community pride, communities will have much more voluntary compliance with government documents. So raising the level of pride is critical to a smooth running community and reducing administrative costs. Just makes sense, right? And I do think the big key in this whole thing is communication. And that's why I'm just going to go right to this one. You know, one thing that we gained when we hired Steve Core, and that position was a communications person. And as you guys have noted, we have a monthly newsletter now. We also have more information that the city does going out in various forms, not just the monthly newsletter, but also on the city's website. And the main reason I wanted to bring this up, and for those of you that don't know, which could be almost everybody here, we actually have the opportunity every single week that if we want to write an article in the Green River Star. And if you're kind of familiar with the editorial page, quite often right across from it, right at the bottom, there's a little bit, about a quarter of a page sort of a thing. And there's all kinds of different subjects. And I think the big theme of communication and volunteerism really is just to communicate with the public in terms of what we want to do before we do it, and including them in that process. That's a huge part of being successful, right? It only makes sense. You're bought into it. And using these three means of communication, it's just a perfect way to do it. We can send it out in the newspaper. We can put it on Facebook. Steve puts everything out in Wild 4 News and the radio network. Sweetwater now, yeah, that was it. You know, so it puts, that's good. I mean, all three of those communication pieces. So I know in the literature that I was reading on this, again, it really emphasizes get the citizens involved. It makes perfect sense, obviously. Early, before you make the decisions. So they're involved in the decisions, and then they're bought into it. And so anybody that comes up with an interest, I mean, that's the way to go. That's sort of our, and the other thing that goes along with that is, and absolutely be positive and happy and, you know, that kind of a thing. I mean, that kind of energy is what we need to just promote and never stop promoting it. And I think Cor made an interesting comment to me about that this morning. It had nothing to do with this. It was completely unrelated, but it turned out it was exactly related. And he said, I just want to make a comment. He said, you know, nobody, think about this, nobody at the end of the council meeting, in terms of council comments, should ever say, I don't have any comments. And what he's saying is if you haven't met for 2 weeks, or even 1 week in the form of a workshop, do you not have something positive, happy, inspiring to the community that you can say? I was driving down the road and saw a duck walking down, and he was walking next to a kid and they were having a race. I mean, I'm just talking nonsense, of course. But, you know, I mean, there's just, if that makes a lot of sense, and I think that should be our underlying, you know, kind of a thing that we keep in mind is communicate, and be positive, regardless of its, you know, anything that's on this, or if it was happened to be the museum, or if we were to talk about the depot, which for 2 years we've been talking about getting funding for, any number of different things. And again, part of some of the things that I've listed down here, they're listed down because they are things that we've talked about for a couple of years and we haven't gotten them. We need to kind of look at them, in my mind, and if anybody says, well, you know, how about the city entryway beautification? Nothing's been done, you know, and there is a bunch of ideas going on. So that if that was an interest to anybody, for instance, I would just happen to be in the dump today, and what's her name that used to work for the city that is at the Wade station?
Louise.
Yeah. She's working with Josh Corsi on a whole thing for the west side of the east entryway in terms of flags, a flag thing, and working with the mines on it. And again, because of COVID, the mines were in the discussion. I was in here in a meeting. They were quite optimistic, willing to help. And we're talking about a big flag initially out there in the middle, a big American flag. And then the idea of a whole bunch of different, you know, potentially state flags or whatever. I mean, there's different things that you could do. Anything to do with Wyoming in different ways.
Great idea.
Yeah, it really is. And then there's my Johnny Appleseed idea, which is, you know, there's water to every tree out there. There's actually underground water to the east side, for instance, which is just a disaster mess on the entrance to our city. And so I've ordered a whole bunch of wildflowers of different colors. And we're just gonna talk with Doug, with Parks and Rec, and we're gonna go out there and we're gonna put wildflowers all over the place on that open field of entry. And it's going to turn into, from a dirt lot that looks like it has a bunch of dead trees, it's going to turn into a beautiful wildflower. I hope. And the kinds of wildflowers that we're dealing with, obviously, if you do your homework properly, it talks about loamy soils. It talks about elevations of 7,000 feet. It talks about drought conditions. They don't really take much water. So the likelihood of it being successful is very high based on the seeds that we're ordering. Wouldn't that be fantastic if all over? And not just there, because they have some and he had the plan, but you know, my thing is in both of those fields, because on the east side it's just very dry, but on the west side where you have grass, on the outskirts there's trees if you look at them. Got them all kind of lined out. And you have flowers all over there. So you have sunflowers and lupins and things like that. Just fill in it'll be a beautiful addition. you know. So again, that's just another beautification thing. And with the flags in that island, I think it'll be, well, what a change to our entryway on the east side that would be. Because with the chamber, we have a very nice entry on the west side. And the west side, and this is what I think, you know, tying this together in my vision, I'd like to push this part of it. The west side is gateway, or pardon me, it's the Trona capital of the world. That's our symbol on that side. We've got Trona equipment out there and stuff. And we can continue to make that a bigger, you know, kind of a thing in concert with the Trona mines. On the east side should be the gateway to Flaming Gorge. And there's some things that we can do with that. And I don't want to mention, there's some things that the Arts Council and monies that they already have given to them to do certain things like statues, like maybe a fisherman that fits in with Gateway to Flaming Gorge, that there's already some resources that we have and that would fit in perfect. And then the flag thing, and we've got a completely different entryway to our city. Yeah. So that's the kind of stuff that you'll see here in terms of, to me, that has to do with downtown improvement, that has to do with city entryway, it has to do with murals, wayfinding potentially. So that's where one of the things that I came up with these topics, and that's one of the areas that that I'm promoting, you know, kind of a thing, or really interested in, and would like to get, you know, some groups going and work with, which I'm already kind of doing, work with the flag people. That includes a lot of different people. It's pretty expensive, you know, $50,000 or so. But well, on the one hand, that's expensive when you do have industry involved and willing to, prior to the pandemic, you know, we're willing to volunteer, and then we can do some fundraising efforts. We can do that for you, so it's not that big of a deal. And the city could even kick in a little bit of money from that, you know, kind of a thing. If anybody, so that's my thing in terms of, and the only other thing, I just want to read this too, and then I'm glad everybody just kind of jump in and see if there is anything. So it says, are there any areas in which you as council members have strong feelings about and would like to adopt as an area to further explore and report back to the council with findings and recommendations? When doing so, consider these questions. This is really important. What is the current state of this topic in Green River? That's really where you've got to just both analyze it and talk to the people, you know, kind of thing, and staff certainly. This is another big, huge one, is what are the positives and negatives currently with it? I mean, you can talk with anything. I mean, budget's always going to be one of them. Public safety is going to be one of them. What ideas do your constituents, city employees, et cetera, have? What have other communities done in this area that has worked well, and how have they done it? We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just go look at somebody that did it and just do it better. How does that fit into the city's goals and vision? That's always a good one to consider. What resources are needed that are currently available? Who else should be involved in the discussion, and what is a realistic timeline? And the essence of all of this is, if we're going to do these things, we need to plan, we need to think ahead, we need to involve the community, and we need to follow through. You know, so we don't just talk about it, put it on the shelf, and talk about it again next year. That does happen quite a bit in government, in case anybody, you know, hasn't noticed. And part of it is the reason why government is inefficient is because of turnover. And it really relates to elections. You know, you constantly have a change in your management team. That's the biggest reason. I can tell you this is a public administration major. That's the biggest reason why government has inefficiencies. It's not that the workers in government are any less than the workers in the private sector. That's not true.
Different priority.
Yeah, constantly changing. Yeah.
Well, pretty lucky. Pretty lucky. We have city to try to
absolutely
keep that to a minimum.
Absolutely.
for other communities.
That's correct.
But I've got a thought. I've talked to the mayor about this many times, and I haven't made it very public. And I've done that on purpose. I find talking to the chamber about it. But if you really stop and think about it, then if we'll all be honest with ourselves, if you're driving down the highway, Kentucky, and you're on your way to Los Angeles, why would you pull off the Interstate 80 and come in? Tell me why. Gas or amp. So I talked to the mayor about it. We need to come up with an idea, a reason for people to want to pull off the highway and stop at the river. Well, I came up with this brainy idea because this finance is super good. No, not because it's mine. But anyway, I think it's a good idea. Why can't we? It's going to take about $25 million so to take this. Why? We're the Trona capital of the world, right? We, all over the world, we are the Trona capital of the world. Why not promote that? What we could do, let's use the county, use the museum, we could build a really nice museum of Trona and telling the people about Trona, what it's all about. And then we take the concept of Disneyland and we take people in a room, in this room, get them in the room, tell them a little bit, turn the lights off, and all of a sudden the walls light up. And we're in the shaft. And all of a sudden you're going down the shaft through the line. Down you go. And then when you get the bottom, and then it opens up and it takes you out into the line. And you get it's kind of a virtual tour of the line. You go out and see how the long wall works. You go out and see how when you first started, when I first started working, how they blasted it. I don't know if it's new side. I mean, you could take them through, you could really, if you really thought about this, really super thing. And then you take the river, you have another room where the people go into this other room and they get to tour the river and have a river trip. Down in Texas, what's the name of the town? I can't remember where it is. They have a little river trip that's virtual like that. And you go in there and you sit down in the chair and you get sprayed with water as you're going down the river.
Sounds like an IMAX. Like,
Yeah.
having that experience.
Yeah.
That's what people want.
Yeah, exactly. And I can promise you, not this has because of me, but we could put this together right. You would have schools bring their kids to come see what it's like. Years ago, when you was young and I was young, we started with Jordan night, and people loved to come out and love that tour. They didn't do that. Had nothing to do with COVID. I think that's everything to safety. Why can't we take this idea and run with it? Cody did it with what is it? Cody Museum.
Yeah, it's a mountain.
Look what they've done with that. No. And people come from all over just to go to that museum. And I've talked to people, my son lives up there, and I've talked to people that run it and go through that. No. What takes a week? Just that's the sun. Well, we've got the railroad. We've got the history of the railroad. We've got some pretty famous stuff that happened here with Roundhouse and the railroad. I mean, there's some things that we could just really.
Those three things in particular, are what Greener was all about. Yeah. And when you think about not only history, which is what you're saying, so there's a lesson for the schools, there's a lesson for history buffs. Then you can have fun in terms of the rides and the water and the Disneyland kind of thing. And then you could actually have all kinds of different rides. I mean, you could have water rides, you could have train things, you could have
even if we and people would come off
even if we started, I mean, to jump into something that big right off the bat, we could start with just like a theater and show a video and rotate the video every hour. As far as one for the mind, one for the
Especially if it
river,
was
one.
3D or something with,
Micro-
in today's
Yeah.
technology,
Yeah.
it's not an ordinary video.
You always build
could
it,
really have
just
stuff
build
where
it
it
and make
comes
it
out.
bigger and bigger until you actually have the
Have any of you been to Disney World?
Disneyland.
Or Disney, have you been to Disney World? I went in the room in Disney World one time, and it's a big round room. And it's flat, and then went in and it says, hang on to the bars. There's bars you have to hang on to. I thought that's stupid. So I went in and I didn't hang on to the bars, and all of a sudden the lights lit up all around. And you started flying across the United States. And you go like this, you're just standing flat, but
Universal Studios has something very similar.
that's what I'm thinking.
Well, and it's similar to the Hanson Planetarium in a way, right?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, people love that stuff. That is a reason to get off the road. And we do have the history and we do have the river. I mean, you go from this kind of a thing down to, because somebody has built a rafting and a tubing business and a raft or like we used to do. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities. And billboards on the interstate and stuff. And then you really do have a reason.
But the only way something like this works is that and this council would have to be unified. And we would have to be committed, have to move forward, have to get up to the kids, have to move the plans.
Well,
It'd be a great thing to put in the depot.
it would be.
Yeah,
Three
walk right
roads,
into the,
right?
yeah, walk right
Yeah.
into the depot.
Yeah.
You're walking into a train station.
Yeah.
And then you go for a ride on the train.
Yep.
You know, there's some road with that.
Yeah, well, it'd be great, and just in terms of, again, not reinventing the wheel, Cody did this in 3 different kinds of time frames, all of which was done almost exclusively with private money. And for instance, Reed's background, when he came here, he came from school district number 1, he ran the school district foundation. That's what did it, was foundation money. Now, we don't have as many rich people in Green River as we do in Cody, for sure.
But we have the lines. That's one of the things.
But we
that
do have wealth in Green River. We certainly have wealth in Green River.
The reason I've been real quiet about this, I don't want Rock Spring to decide and run.
This is a
Correct.
well, the thing about it is first off, we have a train depot, a better train depot, a very good train depot. When you really look at, when you go upstairs and look out over the whole thing and potentially do a whole glass thing up there, we've got one of the only bridges across the railroad. And I don't know if it's in the United States or the state of Wyoming. There's 6. There's only 6 of them. I don't know if that's, I know, but I don't know if that's 6 in Wyoming. I don't think it would be. I think it's 6 in the United States. So that's a huge one. Not everybody has a river.
Well, that's my whole point. Just public safety. If I really had,
Yes.
if I knew we had support account, I would take the ball and I'll try to move it. I didn't want to do that. This is the main problem.
Why would you suggest it now versus prior? So is now the time? Why I'm just asking, because you've had this concept for.
Here's the involved in these things.
We're going to do something like this.
And I think
I don't disagree with it at all.
I think a little bit of the answer to your question, Sherry, is what Robert, quite frankly, is joking about, but it's not entirely joking. Some of us, we've talked about this, that are a little bit older than others.
Just a little.
And, there is a legacy kind of thing about a sense of, let's get something done.
We do need to execute. We need to do something fun that's for this community, and it can be, I think that
kinds of different potential growth of everything. I mean, once you bring people up the interstate, I mean, then every kind of business really profits.
And that's where, starting a big thing like that location. Also, as soon as you start talking about it, got the Carnegie Library, the depot, plenty of properties.
And that's all the planning that needs to, it's just one small piece. That's very good.
Got to have a lot.
Very good. I mean,
I think depot.
I do too. I do too.
But people have a lot of money because it's a historic depot. Historic dollars, another spot would be unreal. It's right next to the house. Right on the highway. You see this pretty big.
Those are all the things that need to be explored.
We have
looked
good
into
places
all those different things. There's a lot of planning to sit down and ideas to come up with. Just like that, just right here, we talked about all kinds of things.
This was Mining Gary's vision of bugging. We have workshops once a month. This was it. Right here, what we're doing. This is why Gary and I pushed so hard for so long.
But you guys think about this. Just think about it. And I think you guys give me and the we're going to do it. I would run this. I'll start doing the work. Like you say, maybe the timing's not proven right now because of COVID.
That's all part of the assessment that you need to do.
Maybe it
We
is.
can certainly get our committees together. We can certainly start the planning process.
I mean, it's a 2 or 3 year kind of type of a thing. But
Now, don't agree with this because I brought it up. I mean, be honest.
It
That's
has
the thing we
nothing to
gotta
do
do in the show. We gotta be honest.
I think she was just wondering why you hadn't brought it up for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years ago.
Because you were at a certain stage of the planning process.
I had a lot of them. I didn't have the Because I'm not lying to you. I was just laying at home in bed at night thinking, we got people. I mean, we want restaurants, we want all this type of stuff. But we've only got 12 type. My boys used to own it in the Jones French. They want to put one in Green River. I went with it. The owner. And he said, we'd like to put it in Green River. He said, why? Because you don't have
That was
the whole reason we started selling the county. It's like, frankly, let's also get something nice around here. We all right, right.
Same thing with us wanting to get another grocery store. We don't have the immediate population. People don't understand that, you take the average household median income. It's 75,000. It's 52,000 down in West Jordan, Utah. That's $20,000 less. So how much disposable money is out there?
we're the second highest in the state next to Jackson.
But they need to sell it on population again.
Yes.
I mean, you look at Florissant. I mean, you do business up with an ice cream shop that nobody would ever have taken a gamble and put an ice cream shop there. Probably one of the most things. Some people drive 50 miles. They drive 50 miles for an ice cream. $2. They drive less for
Too often,
lesser gamble.
these bigger
But
corporations.
that's the same concept.
And same thing with Red Lobster and all.
Well, and it also,
Smaller rendition of
Yeah, they won't. It's what.
I think this also speaks to the question of the timing is population. Because I mean, we know that if you don't have 15,000, then all the grocery stores in Utah, and that's what they told us.
Yeah.
However, what's going to happen when the mine comes in and it's going to bring in 500 permanent jobs, and every permanent sector job is 2.5 support sector jobs. So the economy's, the population, pardon me, is going to grow and get to, this is why we also wanted to know from the census, what is our census? And we're finally about to hear that. you know, and especially relative to Rock Springs, that's important too. But that 15,000 is not too far away, and that then means that the support types of businesses that will bring in people to this kind of a use, because you do have a Jimmy John's, for instance, in town. If they all work together, and we're right on the cusp with that one trona line of growth.
That goes to something else Gary and I brought up for the last 3 years. Where are we going to put them? Where are they going to move? That's it.
What, the people?
Yeah.
Well, have you guys been out to the FMC area lately? You know, there's two things happening right now. One by the golf course, and one by the FMC park. And Jackman is doing one heck of a lot of dirt work, guys. A lot.
Out of the golf course, does that count? Oh.
It doesn't, and you don't want to say the A word, but the fact of the matter is, some of those people that are moving to a new area that don't have the values of the people that might not want to be included, some of those people in those new areas don't have that same thought process.
And I'm not just saying them moving out there versus guessing them moving somewhere else.
You know, this is like everything else. If you've got a new idea, you have to market it, you have to sell it to the whole. And one of the things, for instance, in population growth, and you shouldn't speak of this, but quite frankly, if you gain population from around where you're at, you can grow right. We could grow tomorrow. We could grow 1,000 people. You know how you do that, obviously, with population of people to the west of us, right? That's 1,000 people. You could do that overnight. Then you get the 500, 600 people from the trona lines, and you're over 15,000 people. Then all of a sudden you're on their radar screen. They're coming to us. That's what they do, because we're on the interstate. And if you have a museum, you know, kind of a thing, if you've got something unique, then they're really coming to us. You know, kind of a thing.
As you guys know, I run a lot of my stuff. I've ran, I think, 8 times down in Moab. They have a actor on 6,000 runs. Great. I think it's 6,000 runners. I talked to them. How do you guys do all this stuff? We hired an event planner. We had a little teeny town, we hired an event planner. And then this event planner got all these activities going. And then these activities started going, and they needed shops to buy t-shirts. They needed stuff. So what happened was the events came first, the shops came second, and now Moab. And so,
I know I want to bring in this like start. We do have open land. That's what they're always looking for. But a smaller addition. But you have to go to their for them to come. But you know, I do want to mention though, because of COVID, a lot of corporations, their business models have changed or will be changing. So when they're looking at the population base, but stores, they may be changing it to where the Jimmy John's, okay, it's not going to be the dine-in, it's going to be the takeout. So you can prove the numbers of the takeout, it's going to be just comparable if someone that was inside restaurant, you're not going to sell. They're all looking at the money. It's still not part of it. But maybe some of these have changed.
well, and I think the mayor really needs to know that God to get more people. And
We've always
what really
talked about
drives
rooftops.
Yeah, what really drives people is if we have the job, people will come. I do not believe in that concept. I'll use my idea. On capital world, you build it, people will come. That's not necessarily true. You do build it and you promote it and push it, then you'll get people.
Well, what you started off with is people need a reason to get off the interstate. That would, they're coming by us. If, you know, I mean, we got 100 miles this way and really, to Laramie, you know, real town. Along with Rock Springs and Rollins, you know, there's lots of opportunity. The other thing that we clearly have, and it fits in nicely too, is with a lot of these things, is we have the #1 mountain biking trails in the whole state, and we're doing almost nothing to promote it, which gets into your southern Utah types of areas that grew up on mountain biking and rock climbing. You know, that's how they do
enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
They do their trails.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot, and we've been in a lot of states, but
it's growing.
you can go further.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's growing. People have done quite a bit. There's signage. I mean, there's,
we don't.
yeah, that's a good point.
But there's a thought. You take the Bank Street Road and task them with that plan and start the motor system. If they have the time to do it, I don't know what to do. If you're on Main Street, you're on, you guys understand that's way better, right? But
They're looking at starting another.
Yeah, good.
Between the chamber and the URA.
changes nothing.
They've been working together to try to get something every.
Well, in a group like what you're talking about, you've got to have somebody from the URA, you've got to have somebody from the chamber, you've got to have somebody from the alliance, you've got to have somebody from banking, you've got to have somebody from the school. But that's what you have to.
But that's something that we can say as a council that we've done a great job. I think my personal idea in the last 4 years is bridging a lot of those gaps between. I remember 5, 6 years ago, those entities didn't get along.
Yeah,
you know, they wanted the credit for themselves. They didn't want to share. Never all of them worked together. So.
Well, and I moved to Green River in 1960. I don't know if you was here in the 60s or not. Green River, it was barely. It was just a couple trains. But anyway, I moved here the day that the mine is sure working that old. They had opened by that. And it was Stalker Chemical then and Evans. They was given the city thousands of dollars so that people will have a place to live. So my thought on this, showing capital, is that same. I wasted money for the statue over in high school. I'm not saying that. But I raised $180,000. But I did one thing different for this. Plants I got into their advertising budget. We could do some of those type of ideas with this Trona capital. Would be promoting something. Would be promoting.
It'd be nice if you could get my, you know, you got to look at all your various sources.
Exactly.
We focus on funding the river side of things. If we be on one side and mine on the other.
Yeah.
This could.
Anyway, I spoke.
And another one is Rocky Mountain Powers. But that's all what you got to start down and get a few people and then get a few more people and you know, develop the strategy. I know personally I've heard about this for a long time. I'm more than happy to say I raised my hand, I vote for it, go ahead, let's get going. You know, and it may be that you end up finding out that there are two. I mean, part of this is what is the current state? What are the positives and the negatives? You got to look at all those kinds of things in developing your plan. And it could be, I don't think so, but it could be that no, this is not, you know, the time or it's too big of a project. But you got to start building a team, otherwise you're never going to get anything done. That's the whole purpose of this meeting with Mike. is let's pick a couple projects, and you just come up with one that really involves quite a bit. It's not just one project, it's lots of projects.
I think that just goes to the, you're saying why didn't you start years ago? It's here now. I think it goes to the long-term part of planning. You know, it's not going to happen tomorrow. Next year. Well, it's going to take a while to get going.
One thing that happened in 30 days, these mines started with people. Reeder actually had, and you guys might remember this, they used to have 18,000. And down where I'm living right now, it's all apartments. And over by the senior citizen, there was apartments.
By the, did you say senior citizens? Yeah, TG.
Over there by the convalescent center. And the plants started laying off, and I got laid off. I was one of them that got laid off. And I come from Colorado, bought all those apartments. Colorado. Yeah. So the point I make for Americans, we didn't used to have like 18,000. Yeah.
Well, it's going to take you probably 6 months to action if you all. Like the order study.
Some of the stuff I'm talking about the vampire, that would be one of the large, but it would be one of the things can have to be a real block before we can start. Yeah, public safety aspect, we can't really. I think that in and of itself, a couple things on billboards, it's more traffic on that river, people driving by and watching boats go down that river safely. I think that is going to be a big draw just alone. That would talk about before that we were working a little bit with trying to limit boat ramp down below FNC, so it's actually further on. So you have an 8 or a 9 mile float, you can see where the county is there.
Well, and the good thing about this discussion, Mike, is that is something that needs to be done in effect. That's what you're saying. In order to help this, if that's something that can actually be done quicker.
So I mean,
You're going to see that.
And you could almost have some of the tourism aspects of that taken care of. So when you do start showcasing the river and some type of a kiosk or a deal, you're already utilizing.
And when you build on the river and potentially maybe bring back the kayak park, kind of, it just gets right in with mountain biking. And so, I mean, if you see people with kayaks, you see them with mountain bikes. It's absolutely, and I did make this observation. Last summer was the first time, I call them surfboards. What are they actually called? Paddleboards. I saw all kinds of people, families, out for the first time. For the first time on the river, yes.
Absolutely.
Right by the horse trails, I saw last year.
If you didn't have that sill out there, you.
In fact, Sherry came
came
running by one time.
Because a lot of them sounds like they're saying cooler right on it, lashed down.
Yeah, we're not even safe for rafters.
Oh, I know.
Oh, and some of the boats that go on that river, the fast forward happened, but that thing out there is just.
Well, I'm just saying,
it's not.
The average family that comes to town and wants to do something for a day, you rent a raft and ride down the river.
You can rent one and you can go down, but how many times we call Swiftwater Rescue?
You don't want somebody, a tourist coming from out of town.
Well, and the good thing is, we had that meeting last week. And it's anybody's not aware, and that's moving ahead right now. With we've gotten the local people to agree. Now we need to bring in the people that spend $515,000 to build it. We need to work with that, and Galen's working on that, all those agreements and contracts, and seeing what obligations, if any, we have to those people if we remove what they helped build. I mean, that's not this piece of anything like that. And if we don't, which it doesn't appear from the agreements, reading them as a non-legal person, if we don't have any of those obstacles, then I think that it's the same thing. We need to form partnerships with people to remove it and work on the same piece, the communication and the education within the community of why this happened and why it turned out to be not a good idea, and the safety aspects of it.
When I say something to school, I said, and 8 or 9 years ago, we had an account about that. And we discussed it. We went back and discussed it. And beautiful people didn't stay up in Boston. And one person voted against it. All I put it on the board. Why did you not say you guys go and tell them that 10 years from now, problem with that man. Here we are. So the point I'm trying to make is, without being a jerk, we need to tell our honesty, so that we're not 10 years down the road trying to fix something. And we could have fixed it 8 years ago. The solution that was effective. You know what the solution was?
But not
we didn't do that. And so, and I'm not saying we would have done that, but it sure would have been nice to have that.
The intentions originally were good.
But the return on investment wasn't there.
And still made it. We didn't look at a win-win solution. It should have been a situation where everybody wins.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're talking about now, because we're talking about when you remove it in terms of win-win. There was reasons why it was put in that when you remove it, you're going to remove those good reasons of why you put it in. The biggest one by far is alkali storms.
The wetlands up there.
The horrible storms that we used to have of salt blowing through the air. So in terms of the win-win solution is remove the dam, but somehow continue to do something to get water into the wetlands. Not necessarily for wetland habitat, but to keep down the dust. That was one of the biggest reasons why the people of Green River supported it, because you guys all that were here at that time, I mean, we know what that was like. It was horrible. And I can't imagine, for us personally, in terms of our health, that kind of air quality was a very good thing. Winds coming from the west, blowing salt into the city. That's essentially what it was.
The other deal too was, that's some kind, I don't know if it actually went through, but that's some kind of deal with the central Utah.
Yes, that's who funded it.
That water or wetlands, because they were tearing out on Central Utah.
So just find out if there was a different approach to get the same water from the same source to the point that
I'm
it
sure
needed.
it is.
Upstream side channel, concrete in so you can clean the sill,
Well,
open it a little weird. I mean, there's exact stuff that I think that we could.
that was part of
This that we could investigate what would be a better solution, and then it would still allow a multi-use type thing on the river the way that it is now.
I think they know where they started, because that was on the side.
And now that that's gone and cleaned up, I mean, that's not,
Yeah.
that's a nice little place they got set up.
Yeah, and it's just for the council, because this relates to Gary's point of if we're going to do something, we should all agree to it. One of the things that was an interesting discussion in the meeting was is that when we do the water treatment, and what's going to happen in terms of the footprint that the new treatment plant is going to have, it's essentially the two buildings that are there, period.
You're saying
Wastewater, yeah. It's going to be the two buildings, the office building and the building that houses, the business. Yeah. All those other cells are going to go away and they can be reclaimed. And the point that was made in this meeting by some of the people that were the birders and the people that were for habitat, not for the salt, but for the habitat, was that would be a better place to have habitat improvement along the river, right next to the Greenbelt, right on the Pacific Flyway, in an area where there's more, anybody that's run along or walked along, as I do, the Greenbelt. I mean, just think of all the birds that are right there on that pond that when you walk right past the water treatment plant. It's a bird's paradise. And what they were suggesting as part of the solution is that as we build that plant, and Weston Scout says, absolutely, we're at a point where we can absolutely incorporate that kind of a thing, is habitat improvement, so that if you don't build in or don't have the necessity to build the habitat improvement, maybe with the Central Water Project guys, we're building habitat improvement, we're just doing it in a different location. So they wouldn't object so much in terms of the money that they put into the project. And coincidentally, it fits right into the things that we're talking about in terms of when you're talking about birders and the Audubon Society, that's a big tourist thing. There's a lot of people that travel for that reason. It's just another reason along with those other ones. And it could be another room in the depot, you know, that, or in the Carnegie Library or something, that is just another piece that you're bringing people off the interstate for Audubon.
My bike and I would have the binoculars and I thought the forest and they go, no, we're from Rock Springs, we can come over here. Oh, okay.
You know what we've got?
Tons of pets.
We've got what Rock Springs is. Stop and think about it. Well, I would Rock Springs.
Well, the biggest thing we've got is the
trails out there. And we've got some fish down there, and your idea about pulling the river down further, you go out 10-mile hill and you go down.
You can right across the golf course and everything.
Those cliffs out there is the nice place up there. Yeah. So there's potential to build.
And if we look at that, I mean, there's other places you can put another.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you have two different lands along there, that would keep people from longer.
That's an interesting, just a sidelight is that the Boy Scouts just went out and fixed Owl's Nest.
Yeah.
There was a major project, the two guys that came in. The guy read me this kid read the paper that he had done for it and stuff. And they got Rock Springs Racing Association to participate because they have land adjacent, of course, everywhere and things like that. And I'm told somebody that was just out there, one of our guys, Craig, it's fixed up nicely. So I mean, that's just another little sidelight. Very, very approved road.
See, that's
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, I mean, we got the county park, we got the old Stopper picnic grounds, we got all kinds of, you know, things to witness
We
here.
We just want people out of the
fun things.
We're gonna have businesses too.
I mean, but until we get rid of the public safety act, you know, all, so that's gone, we're gonna have.
Well, yeah, the good thing is just like this, that discussion has already started and we're moving ahead with that. And I think this thing here and pulling in eventually as you go, the bike club and people that like Bill Lewis that at one time rented things that you could float the river on, or the yes, yeah.
The stuff with the bike, I'm sure that they would love to have their event promoted.
Oh, absolutely.
So anything that we could do with the resources, and I know that they already reach out and spend a lot of time with me.
Yeah.
The promotion there, we had, you know, a lot of news and promotion.
And just like Gary did when we did the Distinguished Citizen Award the other day, and Gary took the moment to talk with Lisa about marathons and awards and things of that nature. We need to do the same thing with the bike. an event, and then start to build that, just
They
like
need
River
to
Festival.
do like the Wilton Street race.
Yes.
When they do trails,
Absolutely.
they could do a day race and a night race.
Yep.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, that's like separation. As far as, it's not separate. Sure, well, they have the meeting stuff up there.
Still red and nets.
Always. Let me tell you this, I'm the solution. Sharon,
Thank you for explaining.
She's really smart. But I'm not kidding. I go down to St. George, I go down there, I run 26 miles a day. I get so tired, I can't see, I spend time.
Have come here for run with the horses.
Yeah,
People
just
that are
don't get tired.
all over the country. And
So
they're
what I did,
enthused about coming here to this unit.
Come on.
So what I did, I went up to talk to Lisa. And I'll tell you what I did. I didn't take all your support to do all this. So let's take this race and let's talk to it. They have a nice medal. Kind of. Yeah. I said, so I took in about 10 or 15 medals that I got for the year. I said, look at these medals. Learners like that.
I love novels. I love novels. You just see my wall.
Yeah. And they like a nice t-shirt. And so I explained that to her and I said, look at this. And she looked at it. She said, this is what we need to do with this room. Let's upgrade the metal, make them nicer. The first year it won't get a lot different. They'll start selling. Then I showed her a special clip that you can put your number on that you don't throw away. And I said, and donate. And they're about, for me to buy them, they're $12 or $10. But if the city buys it in bulk, they can get $2.50. But the city local, people ought to put those on the numbers all over the country. And so she's pretty excited about doing that. But she just nice. I would say let's take it out of our council. This year so far, I think we still got.
I think you actually have quite a bit.
But I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
you have about 20,000. I have 5,000.
What charities? Any kind of mayor pay for some Main Street.
Sort of stinks that we would. Stuff we have that only goes to.
Yeah.
Some of that money is
already earmarked for
Very little, very little. You, basically, it's returned every
I
year.
was down there talking to
Lately,
Chris about why
Nobody spends it.
what we had left this year. So I would recommend you, if you guys think it's okay. Let's tell the chambers that they're helping $3,000 on the t-shirt. But you're not gonna get $3,000. If it only costs you $500, bill us. We're not going to give you $3,000.
Yeah, but if you do it that way, maybe they'll look a little harder.
No. But I think they need to expand the number of people that can get.
Yeah.
And include the 10K runs. Not participation, that's fine, but first, second, and third. That's only part of the reason why I want to do it. I like the model, so I watch myself.
You know what we get there for the first, second, and third place in the
I know.
That's no big deal, but some people really like that. Anyway, if we can upgrade a few of these things,
I think the Disneyland conference on there's no heavy, the bells and bells there. It's really nice.
and I showed her one like that. So I showed her, I did Iron Man. I got 2 of those Iron Man. Oh, nice. And know, I did, just about finished last. But
You know, we've gone through mountain biking, we've gone through the river, we've gone through the Diversion Dam, we've gone through the depot, through the Truman thing. And what we want to make sure happens again is that we move ahead with this. And so I think it would just begin with Gary's asking, you know, what, saying that he needs the support of the council to move ahead with the idea of looking into the whole. Doesn't everybody agree with that?
I agree.
Okay.
It depends on what we can afford, you know.
it's just too big of a project to move forward with.
Well, so the point is, at least at the beginning for this meeting here, that's a done deal. So I think the other things, you know, in terms of, because we don't want to go too long. I'm watching people around the room. And just sensing things. I mean, we could go on forever. This is really good discussion. But I think if we maybe get Tara to give us, you know, some of the notes that have come from here, some of the ideas, because we've talked about 7 or 8 different development types of things. And then we have to, meet again and talk about it individually, look at those things and give feedback into, what do you think? What's the best way to look at the other things that we've discussed, not this piece that Gary's talked about, but the other things that we've discussed. What's the best way to kind of break those down and move ahead with those kinds of things? Okay. Okay.
This is the kind of workshop, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the kind of workshop that I think Gary and I envisioned 4 years ago when we started pushing this right here.
Well, I agree.
I think this is phenomenal. I think we have done more collectively as a group than we ever get accomplished on first or third.
Sure.
And you could put a little.
It's different than being our.
And
I
in
don't
the
know about
future, we'll just do one at a time.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think just looking to see how easily it flows when you're actually doing it. If we did an hour and a half, 6:30 to 8 o'clock, you know, more or less, that's about what we're going to do here. At least initially, it doesn't have to be necessarily twice a month. That's what we need to decide here.
It all depends on what staff puts. When staff puts a workshop,
Yeah.
do we want to have a 4th meeting that month so that we can still have this
Yeah.
meeting?
Well, let's just start with right now. There's nothing scheduled for the next for the last Tuesday in April. Do we want to follow up with this while we've got the momentum going, or do we want to wait until the workshop meeting in May?
Oh,
What do you guys think?
I don't want to burn anything out.
Yeah, I don't care. I can do either. Sure. Let's do it. Let's just go follow up. We'll get the feedback from anybody can, you know, we'll get it initially and then we can read it, evaluate it, think of things that you've added or things that were missed, put that back together, and that will be our starting point for the next going on with that. In the meantime, Gary's going to be doing the same thing. He's going to be starting to develop kind of a blueprint and people's names, and then he could bring that back and continue to move that along too. And I think we've taken a huge step forward tonight.
I have some next one recommendation. I agree with exactly what we're doing. Why don't we always just mark out the second Tuesday?
We have for the most part, but staff has
But
directed.
if we don't need it, and if staff wants to workshop, they can have
The 4th, I like that.
Well, and there will be, you know, especially in the next few weeks because of the budget, there'll be some, no, that's no big deal. We'll work around that, whether it's the 2nd or the 4th or whatever. I think Gary's idea that, just to keep this going, that we have a regular meeting, workshop, and then we'll decide, how, and just for people that are sitting there and going, oh, it's not going to be forever. I mean, to get started, if we do that, then it's going to be quarterly.
Just raise their thing.
Well, then that, yeah.
Oh, gee, go for it.
Yes.
I vote for that.
It's unanimous. I'm pretty sure. So, at the moment, whatever the last.
It's the
Tuesday in
27th.
April,
27th.
20 what?
27th.
So bring some cake. Yeah. Does the 27th, is that okay? Okay. Well, just to kind of keep this going, then again, I'm guessing if we get the notes, if we fill those notes in with other ideas and things that we've thought about, we'll be pretty far along in the next one. We'll probably have had a diversion dam, another meeting. We're probably going to have had a Sweetwater, which is a big thing in this whole thing, by the way, the Sweetwater Outdoor Recreation Coalition that's going on, which is Rock Springs, Sweetwater County, and Green River working on through the Parks Department that has all kinds of programs, mostly related to trails types of things, which the Greenbelt, the river, those are all trails. They've got programs that they need to disperse money, and that's why they've come to us, and they've come to 2 or 3 other communities in Wyoming, and they're working on that. Even so far as to, and this fits in with any number of things. It could fit in with the Greenbelt type of the Audubon thing. It could fit in with this, and that is to actually form a state park. A state park. Can you imagine what that would mean to our economy? That's out there. That's out there right now for between Green River, Rock Springs, and Sweetwater County. That's a possibility.
What do you think make more from a state park?
Well, and the other thing that Janessa is so proud of, we just got the designation as the whatever loop that, and there's not a lot of those. We just got that designation. That's going to bring people in. People just do that. That's what they do. They just go on, just like the railroaders travel and do their things, So I think that, and we talk about that, that's going to be one of the things we're going to develop. And we're going to hear, by the way, from people that are watching this, they go, yeah, I'm a railroader. You guys need to follow through on that, So we'll get the community involved. That's good.
So Pete, do you just want notes like bullet points of what you guys just talked about? Okay.
That would be perfect.
And then I will need, if you're going to have a meeting on the 27th, I'll need to know what the topic will be by the 19th. The baloney session? Okay.
You could say, let's see, community growth. What's a good broad term that will take in? Even this is fine.
Just go with the part 2 or something?
Yeah.
Okay. I agree with Mike. We need to kind of go through some, because I know with Robert, through Array, I made suggestions with Main Street Agency to go through, and I, in fact, made a list with Mike of what needs to happen, and if we can expand, maybe not so much sod grant, but like some of the places that are just dirt and it's our sidewalk. Start planting trees in the Atlantic Corridor site. Let's start doing these easy things that are tangible and viewable.
Absolutely.
The application that we can do now.
Yeah.
They have the funding instead of doing the intangible. Exactly. They need to start doing that. And I'm hoping that directive. Let them know.
So what are you saying about this stuff in particular? Are we talking tonight, or are we talking about next time?
Next time.
I think that all we'll do is highlight the ones
Yes.
that we did touch on this time.
Yeah.
Let's not focus so much on the ones that we did tonight, maybe touch a little bit, but then we'll spend the brunt of next meeting. There's a lot of good topics there. see some other ones, just kind of drive your thought pattern to add a couple more.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say, to leave on a positive note, out of the 22 things on here, 11 of them are done or in the process of being done, where 10 years ago, this was all wish list. So,
And really what we're talking about here was
blue canopy stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
Blue canopy.
yeah,
A lot of that stuff we're talking about is driving.
yeah.
And that's where all these ideas
We need
came.
to, and that's what we talked about before, we need to bring that in, those kinds of things, so that they haven't, just because that one in particular is an excellent, excellent tool. I mean, it really has some good stuff in it. We don't have to read that tool. That has programs, it has projects, it's got timelines, it's got goals.
Maybe that's, if we could get a copy of that for the next meeting. Try and have
I
that
have
now.
some.
I know I've got a copy in my back there, but if we just had a
Yeah,
copy
we
for
could get
everybody,
everybody for
we can
everybody,
be looking
yeah.
at this at the same time.
You're talking about this piece of stuff. You're talking about the wildflower.
Yeah.
Is there plans to put some water?
You know,
I think it would get it depth. I just don't, I think it water will be great, but I think so.
I brought that up with the 22 trees that are going to be planted April 29th, you know, partially Arbor Day and partially simply the money that was given by Rocky Mountain Power. I believe just because there were so many trees that were taken that in the cemetery, for instance, on its own, that there isn't that, but that's something that, you know, might be a fundraising thing. You wouldn't need a lot. You know, you could probably, for $5,000, you could probably get enough trees out there, get the lines expanded, the water lines through them.
Well, we do have a tree board.
We do have a tree board. And that's,
Yes.
since Mike volunteered, you know, to follow through on tree acquisition.
Okay, so can I throw a pitch that I gave like 6-8 years ago? This was out there. It really was. But with that being the Toronto capital, you know, with the chamber building and all that stuff for that entrance, something I tried to get over here, the grassy field, which we call it, for A, was a UP type of thing. And a subcommittee actually looked at trying to get UP to donate an old scabbed out locomotive.
Right.
The problem was with getting it there. And that's where the project just kind of fell apart.
Right.
That would be neat to have some.
Well, and that.
Brian Cyril was the manager of these things. He's a great graduate.
We didn't figure the hurdle would be getting them to donate different stuff. It was how to get it onto White Hawk property.
Well, and it's not, and they, you know, they're willing to right now, and it's in the yard, but it's an old, it's got what we call cranes and stuff.
That's what we're looking at having to, because you'd have to get it up and over Flamingo's Way.
But for the most people want to train, you know, kind of, they really want an engine, and that's a whole different proposition because there's not that many, and UP's not nearly as amenable as some old crane. It's not, you know, whatever it is that that's in the yard that they're not using. So. Yeah, Brian's really good. I mean, he's donating the water again for the cleanup day and all that kind of stuff. But
That's interesting you said that because there's a fighter plane that's in front of us. We were having issues trying to bring it. And I was starting to do
I think that's where that committee kind of just was like, we can't do it because all the hurdles they had. But maybe the council.
But the flag committee is working on that also. I believe that also in addition to that. Flags and stuff. They were also working with the idea of trying to get the railroad.
Just a bunch of railroad stuff. We got a bunch of trauma stuff on that side.
Yeah.
A bunch of railroad stuff on this side. It's really cool. Right now, it's just like I said, the committee and the URA call it grassy field.
Well, and even take a look at at it, it's right in the gate if you go this way. You know, it's right there. And you could potentially make something really creative out of cranes. I mean, you could just, wherever your imagination goes, you could come up with some things.
I know
that with the painting, with artists, you know, you could make something out of something that is like, ooh, an old crane car. You know, you could really come up with something that would be really innovative. I don't know what it would be, but I'm sure you could do it.
And there was also the other hurdle was YDOT not wanting pedestrians.
Yes.
So what are you going to do to keep people from trying to get to? So that was the other hurdle.
And that's not going to go away, but
right.
There might be ways of doing. They wouldn't let us, for instance, they wanted to wanted to have murals on that entryway.
Yeah.
They said no there, but on the Greenbelt overpass, you know, which would be really nice. You could brighten that up, put some lights up, and again, you could do the gorge, the Gateway to Flaming Gorge theme of fishing and stuff there. They would say, they said, the district manager said, yeah, I don't even have to ask Cheyenne in effect. You could do that here, but not coming into town because of the traffic and the distraction and things like that. That doesn't mean you couldn't get it worked out.
But the chamber was able to get the overhead right there, the light.
Yeah, that's why I say
kind of like distraction.
You could get it worked out.
So
because it really is not that big of a deal. I mean, they want you to go 30 miles an hour. Come on. You know, we can.
I thought I'd bring it up just because
the big thing is planning into the area, parking. You know, I mean, that's the big issue, and pedestrian movement. I mean, you could have the parking underneath it, like where people informally park, just on the other side of the sitting in the restaurant, the hitching post. You could have it there. There's not a lot you can do on the side where the fields are, you know, for parking.
How much land's behind that fence?
You know, UP is really, really defensive about their property, which is given to them.
it's all there, right?
But George,
by the Constitution.
on the other side where Marty Carollo has his business there, behind that, actually coming in on the road to where the butcher shop is and William Smith and Associates, you know, if you went to the left there by Hydrofab and stuff, there's potentially good access there that you could make a path.
And that's city property there. I think that is.
No, because whenever people have put, I know this from being a politician, whenever people have put their sign up, there's a guy from Rock Springs that owns it. But you know, in other places, and it ties into potential greenbelt, and we'll be done by 8 o'clock if anybody's concerned. But when you come into Green River and from the east, and you know there's that little dirt road, you know, kind of a thing, there's potential to do something along there. Kind of, it almost becomes between there and the Cemetery Road. Actually, those things kind of tie together a little bit. There's ways in which you could do it. You could do it.
Hey, I want to tell you two something. Over in England, there's this old church, and they have a meeting every Sunday, and it lasts 1 hour, and it never has gone over 1 hour. You want to know why? Because when it hits the hour, the bottom falls out of the preschool.
And we put that in the budget.
Yeah, excellent discussion. And it's actually
Trying to get out right now.
It's actually at 2 o'clock, not 1.
Yeah, I thought it was 1 too. I had thought myself like, oh, now it's 2. There wasn't a change to 2.
Well,
But 2.
it would have worked for me. I got an airport board meeting at 1.